Hello there and welcome to the TZM Global Radio. You just heard a part of The Burning Number by Dead Letter Circus, a band based right here in Brisbane, who I really admire, not only for their sound but their socially aware, enlightened lyrics. I was fortunate enough to meet them at their concert last year representing TZM and had the opportunity to briefly chat to the drummer who writes the lyrics with the vocalist Kim. Very much in line with our values, we plan on doing podcasts with them in the near future. At the moment, they're touring through the US until the end of the month, so if you are in the US, I highly recommend checking these guys out. Anyway, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Casey, and I'm the Australian coordinator based here in Brisbane, Queensland. This is my first attempt at a lone podcast, so please don't be too hard on me. I know the audio quality isn't the greatest, and I didn't realise until after the whole show that there were noisy crickets in the background the whole time, and every now and then you can hear a car and some other random animals that we have here in Australia. So I've used the wonderful noise removal tool to get rid of it, but if you do hear one sound every now and then, usually crickets, then I do apologise. You won't hear it through the whole show though, and I am hoping to get some better audio equipment if all goes as planned, but for now I hope this is bearable enough for you. Thanks to James Phillips for the opportunity to submit a podcast for Global. If you'd like to do the same, get in contact with James first to get details on the requirements that you need for to put up the podcast, and I've just put those in the show notes. Feel free to also check out the Zeitgeist Australia podcast, which is relevant to all. It's not specifically directed towards Australians, as TZM is a global movement and we consider ourselves part of a global community. We have a bit more freedom with the format and content of this show, and Zach, the host and a good friend of mine, generally interviews, or you could probably say has a conversation with other Zeitgeisters about their experience and point of view on a range of topics. A new one should be out by the end of this month, and I urge you to check it out and to check out the ones that are already up. Okay, so let's get started with today's show, and what I wanted to talk about today, something that's been coming up quite a lot within the chapters around the world lately. In particular, I'd like to talk about political parties and how the Zeitgeist movement either collaborates or doesn't collaborate with politics. Now, living in a society where we are surrounded by this idea of politics or politicians, I guess the political system controlling the way that we run our countries and run our local council and so on, some people argue that not collaborating with these groups is disempowering to us, that we could actually make some really valuable connections by connecting with maybe the fringe groups within the political parties. So for example, in Brisbane, where I'm living, we do have a political party called the Sustainable Party, which used to be called the Sustainable Population Party. And the candidates that run for these parties do have a very different outlook on the world compared to other political parties. They do like to address issues such as immigration and what it's going to be like for our future in Australia in particular. They're not so much looking on a global sense, which is what the Zeitgeist movement does, but is it harmful for us to work closely with these groups? And that is the question I want to talk about today, or actually pose to everyone else today. On some level, collaborating with a political party that does have some of the same ideas or trains of thought that we do could actually encourage them to think in a more global sense and to actually influence their policies. On the other hand, it's been very clear within the Zeitgeist movement from very early on that getting involved in political parties is almost pointless, in that we are all aware that the political parties that will also always ultimately make decisions about our society are always influenced by corporate interests. And that is because we live in a monetary system where profit is the main incentive. So it's very difficult for political parties that do want to make positive long-term change to make it to a position where they would have any significant power. For example, the Ubuntu Party in South Africa, which actually got quite a lot of attention and had a lot of confidence that they would be able to make a big difference, were very shocked when they found out that they received very few of the votes. Whether the people didn't vote for them, or whether the voting system was rigged, or we could even look at the fact that the way the voting system is designed influenced this disappointing event. It kind of makes me think that regardless of where your heart lies, if you have a mission and you want to make the world a better place and your policies are realistic and so forth, getting involved in politics could ultimately be pointless, or at least not as productive as using other channels. Some people might argue that this is the most powerful way that we can actually make a lot of positive change, whether that be through influencing a lot more people, or whether you actually do get a seat in Parliament or something like that and you're able to have some say. In Australia, we have the Greens Party, which has also been kind of a fringe political party against our Labor and Liberal parties, which are ultimately, the two choices that you have in Australia when it comes to voting. And the Greens Party offers that alternative that are more environmentally based, more long-term thinking, more thinking about the influence on people and how their lives are and so forth. But there's another really wonderful person that I met in Brisbane who is a candidate for the Greens Party. A lot of people get angry at this party because they slow down progress, or progress as the mainstream media like to call it, because they want to maintain the environment. They don't want copious amounts of infrastructure being created and destroying environments around us in the meantime. So a lot of people have a problem with them for reasons like this and several other reasons. And a lot of people just have a negative attitude towards them because they were taught to think that way from an early age anyway. So some of the people that work within these parties once again, have their heart in the right place. They really want to make a better world, or they want to make a better city, or they want to make a better state, or whatever level they're working on. And they're working on things like creating better bike paths for people around the city so that people don't rely on using their car so much for transport and so forth. So they do actually make some small-term changes. In our chapter, we've had quite a lot of discussion in recent times about presenters at Z-Day. And last year, we really left it quite open. So people from a range of different organizations that wanted to make some positive difference for people were invited to come along and speak. A lot of these people weren't necessarily advocates of the Zeitgeist Movement, but we had the other angle, which is that if they come along and present for us and we support them in the work that they're doing, we might influence them to think about long-term sustainability and global sustainability, and also looking at the system as a whole, rather than looking at these small changes, or even just not even considering for a second that something beyond politics is possible. So I'd like to put this question out there for anyone listening to this today. How do you think politics plays a role within the Zeitgeist Movement? Do you think it should be completely disregarded and that we should stay away from anybody who's working within the political framework? Or do you think that we can possibly collaborate with these people and share our ideas and educate them on the way that we see the world, and also support them with making the positive changes that they do want to make? It is a very difficult question. Is the Zeitgeist Movement losing integrity by considering working with political parties? We've stated in the past that not working with political parties is an integral part of what we do. My personal opinion is that anyone who wants to work towards making the world a better place is an inspiration. And anyone who puts their time and energy in whatever shape or form is wonderful. But I do have concerns, especially as someone who considers herself a Zeitgeist Movement spokesperson. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the constitutions of our current system, and my fear is that the message of the Zeitgeist Movement will get distorted and possibly dissolve into the extremely powerful and detrimental trajectory of capitalist ideals. We have to remember what the message of the Zeitgeist Movement is. Isn't it that the current constitutions of our system are detrimental to sustainability and to a truly better future? And through my understanding of the power of corporate entities, and my understanding of the human psyche, and my understanding of how the most powerful people in the world are also the most empty, non-empathetic, with serious values disorders. If you look into Gabor Mate's work, then you can learn a bit about that. I can't see how the current democratic system, if you want to call it that, which is operated by the government, who is controlled by corporate interests, will ever give fringe parties a true voice. As we know, it is an illusion of choice. Within politics, it's always the political party who serves corporate interests that will win in the end. They are the ones who are the most powerful because of the money, and that with that power, they have the ability to create bias within mainstream media, and they can convince large populations about stupid and unethical ideals, and they can convince populations to continue the status quo and to be risk-averse. Some would even say to consider playing in this unequal playing field is supporting their outdated, ineffective constitution, that almost by participating at all, you are supporting the system which you're fighting. But I do understand those people who are working within those frameworks. I think something else will make the shift, though. I feel like I support these people on a personal level, but I feel uncomfortable doing that within the Zeitgeist Movement because I don't want to lose integrity. So I'd prefer to put my energy and my limited energy and my limited time into what the Zeitgeist Movement has always said will make the shift. This is what I think. Art, technology, science, education, and innovation. These are the type of things I'm looking for when I'm looking for speakers for Z-Day, when I'm looking to collaborate with people, and so on. So even if people are working within a political party, I'm not looking for what they're doing within that party. I'm looking for what these people are doing individually, even outside of the work they do for the Greens Party or for the Sustainable Party or so on. So, think about new technologies which are being developed now that the government can't control, that are giving power back to the people. I think about things like Uber, Bitcoin, Airbnb, Ethereum. And I know these aren't perfect. I know that these still have corporate interests. I know that these are being controlled by nasty, evil corporations a lot of the time. But they do have a more decentralized system which is regulated by the people. So they're a better example of what could be. Technologies that are being developed to empower the third world also, such as bottles that filter dirty water, glasses that people can adjust without having to go to an optician, open source hardware, open source ecology, cybernated farm systems, that's Douglas Malat's project, and even just creating access to the internet for people in third world countries so that they can educate themselves on whatever they need within their community. There was a project called Hole in the Wall, which was developed for people living in India. And the list goes on. I think innovations such as alternative voting systems, decision-making processes like Agile, and even older innovations that we really still need to educate people on, the general population, such as the scientific method. These are the things that can truly empower people. One example of this is the idea of a project that is being worked on here in Brisbane, and it's called The People Decide. Basically, it's an app that has the potential to change the political system directly. It's not just following the rules of the system. Basically, the idea is that you would receive a notification about an idea for a new policy, and you would vote on it. You would vote for it, you would vote against it, and then they would collate those results, And this would not be your traditional voting system either. We'd probably use something similar to minimal opposition voting, which is a part of the direct democracy work. And I'll post a link to, it's a very dry video, but it very clearly explains how it works there. So you could use something like that to make clearer decisions about what is important for people. And once they collate those results, they send them off to the candidate for the people to decide. And rather than the candidate actually making the decisions themselves, they just use what the people have said, what the people have voted upon. And that instead gives people control over what policies go ahead. It's very different to voting on a person, and a person makes promises, and of course they always break the promises, either because they never were going to keep them in the first place, or they don't have the resources, they don't have the money to do that. So there are other ideas out there for things that we can do. I mean, even with this particular project, some might argue that, look, the people decide is still not going to ever have a say. But if people know for certain that they are being empowered by this, maybe there's a chance, or at least there's a chance for people to actually recognize that the democratic system is a complete rot, and that it wasn't working from the beginning anyway, and that our votes actually mean nothing. Either way, it might open people's eyes up. So I think that's getting closer to something that I would support within the Zeitgeist movement, rather than just supporting a political party working in the framework of the political system that has been created. Anyway, after all of that, I still think that anyone who has a great idea and a positive attitude is a great person to be working with the Zeitgeist movement and to collaborate with. But I really would like to hear what people have to say about this. And I feel like at the moment, different chapter coordinators around the world have different ideas about this too. And I really would like to nut this out so that the Zeitgeist movement doesn't lose too much integrity, and we all have a clear understanding of our connection to politics, and we actually know the way forward when it comes to connecting with someone within a political party. Okay, so that's all I have to say about politics today. So I'd love to hear your feedback on that. The next thing I wanted to talk about today was, how is it possible to make a small impact on the environment but a big impact on people? That is, to connect with the most people possible. Sometimes I have found this a real challenge. And if you think about things like going vegan or riding your bicycle rather than driving your car, I mean, this is on a very micro level, but these kind of choices can sometimes make it more difficult to work on the projects that you want to work on. If you put or even something like moving out to a sustainable community that's away from the city because you want to decrease your carbon footprint or something like that. I struggle with finding that balance, and I wonder if anyone else there does as well, that you want to have the most ethical diet that you can have, one that you feel like you're causing the least impact, but you still want to have the freedom. You don't want to have to always think about what you're eating all of the time, and you don't want it to be time consuming, because that takes time away from other projects on actually connecting with people, on creating content like I'm doing now, for example, and things like riding your bicycle. If you do need to pick things up, for example, I know that in some circumstances riding your bike is very energy consuming, and it also isn't convenient a lot of the time. I ride my bike most of the time, I really do, and that is purely because I live in a central area in a city, so it's pretty easy for me to get to places. The only time I would drive in general is when I have a lot of things, when I have to take something heavy, or if I'm picking a person up or something like that. So I'm just wondering, for anyone out there, I think people who can live this low carbon footprint lifestyle are very inspirational. And, you know, we always say, be the change you want to see in the world. That's kind of like our slogan. It's even on the main website. So if you start with yourself, then you're able to influence people more easily. But I do wonder if this is actually true, or whether should we always be holding ourselves personally accountable for the atrocities of the world, when even if we personally are making ethical choices and being a good role model for the people around us, is this ultimately going to make the big changes that we really want to see in the world? Something I've found that it is quite different about Zeitgeist Movement people is we look at issues on a global level. So even if people aren't living life in this perfect way, we're not being the most sustainable person in the world, we understand that this is not something that can purely be solved through individual choices. This is something that we need to look at globally, and we need to make big decisions to stop really big problems from occurring. I think about things like the mining companies and so forth, and us exporting coal to China and things like that, and how much of a huge environmental impact that has, compared to me making sure I switch off the lights when I leave the house. And of course I do that. But ultimately, what should we really be focusing our energy on? Of course, we want to focus our energy on becoming great role models, but we also need to find a nice balance between that and working on the bigger issues that are out there, the ones that are really making a huge difference. I'm not sure if that's what I believe. I'm still working on trying to find this balance here, and I'd love to hear what people out there have to say about this as well. So I'm trying to make this, I guess, as interactive as possible, and I'd really like to get more comments from people about what you really think and kind of get an idea of the culture that we're creating within the Zeitgeist Movement, and see if there are people out there who have different ideas to others, or whether we're all kind of on the same, and whether we all have the same kind of mindset. Okay, so I know some really lovely people who feel this way, that the change comes from the inside and you have to do what you can to make the world a better place and be that role model. And I was talking to a girl one day about, she was doing sewing classes with her sister, and she said, I refuse to do sewing with my sister because she doesn't source her material ethically. So until I found my own material that I thought was ethical, I wouldn't begin sewing lessons with her. Where is the line between enjoying your life, still being happy, and still being able to connect with other people so that they don't feel alienated by you, or you don't alienate yourself and not be able to connect with most people, and being ethical? So anyway, I did just talk about that, but I just wanted to bring up that particular example. Okay, now for something a little bit lighter. It would be really great if we could get someone from the Zeitgeist Movement, or anyone who'd like to come and visit Australia, to come and meet us here in Brisbane. We've actually created quite a strong culture within the Zeitgeist Movement here, and I feel like we have a lot of fun together. We do work on a range of projects, including the Community Tours project, which is us going out, visiting communities, sharing our ideas with them, and them sharing their ideas with us. And that has been really successful. We've made a lot of friends out of these places. Plus, it's a beautiful weekend. Usually we go camping and we get to swim in these beautiful, pristine lakes and things like that, and see what they're working on. And yeah, it's usually quite a nice thing to do. We also have a range of other projects like the People Decide, which is what I was talking about earlier. And a lot of people in our group are just really clever, really thoughtful people who've worked really hard in a range of particular fields such as human behavior, nonviolent communication. We've even got a geneticist, a expert in artificial intelligence. So a lot of the time, the conversations we have on our social nights are a lot of fun. And a lot of the time, they're very silly, because we feel like in our group, we have the opportunity to kind of talk about these out there thoughts that we have, that in these groups they're not out there thoughts. In this group they are just a regular conversation talking about ideas and the future and even the problems with the current system that we live in. It's not a big deal in these groups socially to say something as outrageous as there is no God. you know, if you say that with most of your friends or family or something like that, this can be quite a contentious thing to say, or even something as simple as corporations influence political interests. That can really cause quite a debate within most groups. But within this group, you have, within the Zeitgeist Movement chapters that you have, these kind of topics are almost disregarded because because we understand that. We've gone through that and it's not a big deal to us. So we do end up talking about really silly things sometimes, and we have a lot of fun together. And one of the most recent, I guess, silly ideas that we came up with, I wanted to talk about on the podcast today. It's, I think that we could have a lot of fun with this and actually kind of bring an element of humor into the Zeitgeist movement a little bit more. So this was originally an idea developed by Eris Ryan, and he likes to have quite a lot of fun and is always joking around about things in quite an intellectual way. I can't find an example right now, but this is a really good example. He has called this the tinfoil hat scale. Okay, and just a premise on this. We were talking one day about how it's sometimes difficult to weed out, it's such a terrible way to say this, to weed out people in the Zeitgeist movement that are actually in support of the train of thought, or who have taken it one step further and have become really out there conspiracy theorists. You know, those people that actually make the Zeitgeist movement look like we're crazy tinfoil hat wearing people. So every now and then you get someone that comes to a public event that has some really out there ideas. And of course we're happy to work with them, and we're happy to share ideas and maybe to help them with their critical thinking skills and so forth. But you don't win them all. And now we've developed this scale. It's called the tinfoil hat scale, and it's measured in cap wraps, which is the number of wraps of foil required to block out the satellite mind readers, which is how Eris puts it. Now, this is all tongue-in-cheek. This is all really silly, and we just use this scale in a silly way to kind of measure somebody's level of conspiracy theorist. Please don't take this too seriously, guys, but I thought that this would be something fun to share with you today. Okay, so to find out what level of conspiracy theorist you are, we start at 1 and we work our way up to 10. 1 being, you know, a bit of a conspiracy theorist by mainstream standards, and 10 being completely out there, completely in their own world. So, what are you? If you think that banks run the world, then you are a 1. And we could take this further. We could put in more detail about this, and you could have a conversation about this, like, what does this actually mean, banks run the world? How do you define that? Let's get into the real details about this. But I want you to just think, if I consider this at all, then I'm a 1. That's kind of how it works. If you consider it, you're a 1. You'll know when you aren't up there anymore, because you won't even consider the idea. All right, number 2. The New York Twin Towers were demolished, not burnt down. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. So there we go. I'd probably say most people in the Zeitgeist movement are a 2 so far. Okay, now we're going to move up to something a little bit different. We're going to move up to something a little bit higher on the scale. Let's see if you're a 3. 3 is some pop stars are part of the Illuminati agenda. What do you think? Let's go on. Number 4. Okay. Number 4. The government are engineering the climate by spraying chemicals in the atmosphere. If you think that they're spraying chemicals in the atmosphere to control our minds, you get a half extra point. Alright, number 5. Now, this one comes from this very strange group that I heard of a couple of years ago, that some people who were in the Zeitgeist movement previously, and I'm not sure if they're in it anymore, but they joined this group called the Red Pillars, and they were all men who had decided that actually women rule the world, so that they'd all been lied to, and that women actually have a much easier position in the world because they can use their body and
beauty to work, to make themselves successful, and they can rely on men to make themselves successful and so on. So this was an interesting concept. They were called MGTOW, which is men going their own way, which was just full of woman-hating men. I think it still is. It's a really dangerous group. But anyway, so number 5 is women actually secretly rule the world by controlling seemingly powerful men. What are your thoughts on that? I don't want to get too much into that. As a matter of fact, the whole feminist movement thing, I think, causes a lot of stress for people. A lot of people get really angry about this and extremely defensive. And I, in recent times, have decided that I don't really talk about this issue anymore. And maybe that is a negative thing because I am a woman and maybe I should be sticking up for women's rights a little bit more. But I found that, you know what, I'll leave that to people who are really highly interested in that subject. And, you know, to be honest, I'm not sure what my stance is on that. And I don't really feel comfortable making my male friends feel isolated from me. And regardless of who's wrong or who's right, I'd rather stay away from that issue. But, you know, whatever people want to do, gender issues are a real problem. I definitely recognize that. Okay, let's go to number 6. Now we're out there, guys. Now we are really working our way away from Zeitgeist Movement ideals. But people would just lump us in with this because it seems to be that if you think that the Twin Towers could have been an inside job, then you basically believe that lizard people who look like regular people run the world. There seems to be some kind of culture that's being created in mainstream media that is, if you question anything big, then you are really out there and you don't really understand the world properly and so on. So, number 6. Rectal probing is a standard procedure by extraterrestrials. Or we could even just say there's aliens. The government's hiding the aliens. That's number 6. What do you think, guys? Okay, number 7. Now, number 7 came from a guy that we met who came along to one of our meetings, and he would say it was racist. I really think it was completely racist, but he genuinely believes that anyone who is Jewish is influenced by Zionist ideals. So even when we were watching Robert Sapolsky, he pointed out that Robert Sapolsky had been brought up Jewish, as if that was meant to influence what we thought of him. Oh my God. But anyway, so number 7 is all Jewish people are Zionists who want to take over the world. We're really getting up there now, guys. Okay, number 8. That was the one I said before. I can't believe this is only number 8. I mean, I think we've also argued what level these should be on, which one is more out there than... Okay, so number 8 is the one I said before. Lizard people who look like regular people run the world. The reptilian overlords control us and so on. Yeah, and I know that there's these YouTube videos out there where they zoom in on some, I don't know, banker's face, and they notice that his eyes don't blink or something. I don't know. But this is the only evidence they have to support this. But I was talking about this with Zach, and I think this will come up in our next Zeitgeist Australia podcast. Like I said, it's a different format to this, so please check it out. It's a lot more relaxed, and we do actually get into detail talking about conspiracy theories and so on. And my thoughts on this is that the reason people think this is they've got a misunderstanding of human behavior. They think that humans couldn't possibly be so cold-hearted as to enslave the rest of the population. That only a different species that didn't think like us would possibly do this to other human beings. So they use these YouTube videos and the support of other people who think this to convince themselves that this is true. And also they don't have very good research skills, I suppose. I don't know why people believe these things, and it really disappoints me when these are people that support the Zeitgeist Movement. I guess people just keep digging deeper. They want to question things about our world. They want to question things about our society. So they just keep on going and digging down that rabbit hole, but they haven't actually learned how to think properly. And I also think that it's based on ego a little bit. But anyway, I'll talk more about the ego thing after I finish this. So let's go to number 9. All right, guys, you ready? There's a planet between Jupiter and Saturn named Nibiru that's occupied by aliens that want our gold. All right. I don't know what to say about that. I don't think that I need to convince everyone out here that that's absolutely ridiculous. But there are people who believe this. They really are. And I think it might be a similar reason to the lizard people one, but who freaking knows? I don't know. Anyway, let's go to number 10. Are we ready? Number 10. Drum roll. The Earth is flat. Yep. I've met some flat earthers. And actually there was a rapper recently that I heard about in the news that believes that the Earth is flat as well. And equally, on number 10, you have the Earth is hollow. And it's like the Earth is inside out and we're actually living inside it and the stars are in the middle. And so all of these, if you say to them, well, it doesn't make sense because people have been to space and, we can fly, they would just actually say something like everyone's basically in on it, that there's holograms and that most of the world is against them, kind of like a Truman Show kind of attitude. And so this is what I was going to say before about people believing something so very outrageous that it's, 10 on the scale, this faith-based conspiracy theorist thing. I think it's ego. That there's something nice for people, that there's something empowering in believing that you are one of the few people that know the truth. I'm not like that personally, and I wish people understood the problems in our world and the way that money works and the way and the infinite growth paradigm and structural violence. I wish people understood this kind of stuff. That would make the world so much better for me and so much easier for all of us. But I know that some people get this sense of empowerment over thinking, well, I know the truth and you guys don't know the truth. So if you just convince yourself of something that is so outrageous that there's probably, a handful of people that believe the same thing, then you're really smart. You're really cool. Anyway, so that was a bit of fun. We've called this the tinfoil hat scale, measured in cap wraps. How many cap wraps do you need to block out the satellites? Yeah, so this is one of the silly things that we like to do within our groups rather than working on these important projects that we do. But I still think that it really brings us together and really helps us work on projects better together. And it's funny because when we meet someone new, we would never share this with someone new to the group unless we knew that they really understood our sense of humor. But we might say, oh yeah, that new guy, what's he on the scale? Oh yeah, I think he's about a 4. And we measure ourselves, like, hi, I'm Casey, I'm a 4 on the cap wrap scale. As a joke, of course. Okay, I feel like I have to keep saying it's a joke because I'm actually really nervous that people out there are going to think that we're taking this seriously and we're losing integrity in the movement or something like that. I feel a bit disappointed in myself. My best friend, who I've been friends with for 5 years now, we studied journalism together. She knows that I've been into the Zeitgeist Movement the whole time that we've known each other, that I've worked really hard on it, that I spend most of my time working on projects and most of my friends are people I've met through the Zeitgeist Movement. However, she still doesn't understand what the Zeitgeist Movement is and what we're about. We ended up talking about this one weekend, and it's not until the end of last year that I was really able to truly articulate this to her. And I think she's actually kind of avoided talking to me about this in the past because also I think a lot of people just want to live the life that they were trained to live when they were young. Everyone knows that the idea of success, and when I say knows, I'm being sarcastic, Everyone knows that the idea of success is to own your own house, to get married, to have 2.3 kids, and to have a successful career. That these are the things that we aspire to be, and once we have all of these things, then we will experience true happiness. But by breaking it down and realizing that this will not find true happiness, and you kind of have to rediscover who you are and what's really important to you, this can be extremely depressing for some people. And I know that people who already suffer depression find this extremely difficult, and I think that's the reason why sometimes when you talk about the ideals of the Zeitgeist Movement and people actually do consider what you're saying and they actually do feel connected to what you're saying, they'll get extremely defensive and stop you right there. Because just like Bill Hicks said, they've got a lot of invested in this ride. What about my big bank account? My furrows of worry, or whatever he says, something like that. And yeah, we break that down, and then they feel fearful, and they don't want to feel fearful. They want to feel like that everything they've worked for means something. And so by me coming along and ruining that for them, I don't know, sometimes I feel a little bit cruel. Even when I talk about the ideals of atheism to people who are Christians, and I know people have different ideas about this too, whether we should actually whether we should actually really break that down in a logical sense and actually make them consider their long-held values and beliefs, whether it be in religion or capitalism, whatever. Some people say that's the same thing, that capitalism is a type of religion, but that's for another day. That whether it's worth breaking that down for people, if we are unable to change this culture to something that we really want to see, is it worth taking this security away from people? There's another question for today. I'm going to leave that one out there for you to consider and to think about. Sometimes I felt really guilty after talking to people about these ideals, and all of a sudden they're left there thinking, oh my God, what do I do with my life now? But I know that in the long term this could be extremely positive, and that it's definitely worth talking about these things if we get more passionate people out there talking about these ideas and making changes and doing things with their life that are more meaningful. We don't want to live our whole lives doing something that we don't really believe in. I think that is the stance that I have. But I just feel a tinge of guilt sometimes when I talk about these things and make people feel sad. I don't know, maybe I'm just too emotional or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, we do have a few new podcasts coming up on the Zeitgeist Australia website. Zach is the host of that one, and we've got 4 up already. We haven't put one up for a while. It's been very busy over the, Christmas period. Zach has promised me he will have the next one up by the end of this month, and I hope that by getting this one up there before then that this inspires him to do that. He does work really, really hard on this, by the way. I don't want to put him down at all, but it just has been difficult when we haven't given ourselves really strict deadlines. So Zeitgeist Australia will have our next podcast up soon as well, and that will be part 2 of my conversation with him last year. And finally, something I probably should have talked about at the beginning of the podcast is Z-Day. Very exciting. Z-Day is coming up. The main event is in Greece, in Athens, and Peter Joseph and Abby Martin will be there, as well as I think it's the creator of P2P, and a few other really interesting speakers, I'm sure. Here in Australia, we are having our Z-Day on the 19th of March. We found it difficult to have it on the 26th because it clashes with Easter. I know we're not really into religion, but it really made it hard for us to get speakers, and I think it would really limit our audience when people have to go home and visit their family and so forth. So we've made ours for on the 19th of March, which is kind of funny because it actually connects with the election day. And if you didn't know, for those people listening elsewhere in the world, we have something called compulsory voting in Australia, which means you have to vote. So at some stage during the day, we're going to have to allow people to go out and vote, which is so hilariously ironic. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. So 19th of March, we've got some really interesting speakers. If you are around us in Brisbane, or if you'd like to find your way here, we have someone coming to talk about Ethereum, which is a new internet platform that is peer-to-peer, so it takes away the ability to monitor us as much.
We also have the Australian representative for nonviolent communication, Kate Crombie, coming along, and that should be really exciting. We also have some speakers coming from some of the communities we've visited to talk about updates on what's going on out at their sustainable community. And, you know, they might give us some pointers as to what we could do towards working towards a resource-based economy. We also have a representative from Beyond Zero Emissions, which is a company here that's working towards making Australia exactly that, zero emissions. And they have a range of very well thought out policies to work towards that future. We've been working very closely with BZE for a long time. At this stage, we also have a speaker from 4ZZZ Eco Radio coming along, and these guys have been supporting the Zeitgeist Movement for a long time, so we're really excited to have them there too. And finally, I shouldn't say finally, we're still working on getting a few more really good speakers, but I don't want to say them here in case they can't come along. But we also have the creators of the People Decide, which is the app that I was talking about earlier on in the show. So I'm really looking forward to Z-Day this year in Australia as well. I'm hoping sometime in the future we can make it to a Z-Day overseas and meet some of the other chapters. Sometimes it's a little bit isolating down here in Australia where we're far away from everybody, but we all follow all of the work that is being done globally, and we keep connected with the coordinators around the world. We're really looking forward to working more collaboratively with other organizations as well, such as the recent TeamSpeak meeting with United Earth, which is an organization that is working towards bringing a lot of ethical organizations together to solve the world's problems. And that's just in a nutshell. Okay, well, I hope that you've enjoyed the podcast today, and I would really like to hear your feedback on the questions and the challenges I've posed for today. And just for those people who weren't sure, the national coordinators from around the world do come together on TeamSpeak once a month to talk about what's going on in their chapter and ways that we can collaborate and work on projects together as well. One thing that is in the works is getting the main website updated. So that's in the process of happening, I believe. And we'd love to have more people involved in working on making the world a better place. Thanks for listening, everyone. My name's Casey. This is TZM Global Radio, and I look forward to talking to you next time.